Cypress Development Corp's flagship lithium project is located just east of Albemarle's Silver Peak mine in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. A 12-hole exploration drill program for lithium-enriched claystone on Cypress's 100% controlled properties is now underway. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the Pink CYDVF, and on Frankfurt C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thank you, Jim.
Stewart, an interesting piece in the Victoria newspaper about why do we pay so much for gasoline in BC? Why do we? And do we have to?
Well, we're very dependent on a limited amount of infrastructure and ways of getting gas to the market. It's really as simple as that. We get about 60-odd% of our gasoline from the Trans Mountain Pipeline. That's, in a sense, a modern pipeline, but it's also one that was designed and built to the size that it is in the 1950s. And unlike just about everything else, from the size of popcorn boxes at the supermarket to the size of cars we're driving, it's gotten bigger. So what can we do about that? And I think the idea that we have a provincial government in BC that is deliberately trying to constrain the source of 60% of our gasoline for their own political reasons is, when you think about it, pretty interesting. Like, why would they be doing that to consumers? But that's what's happening, because the BC government is opposing the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. And so what goes around comes around. I think here's a populist government that wants to talk about how it's helping the everyday family, the average wage earner, the low wage earner, by making life not as expensive. Well, why are you preventing gasoline from getting to people at a reasonable price? Because the shortage of supply, it's classic, supply and demand, shortage of supply, price goes up. And that's exactly what's happened. Jim, I just did a bit of a calculation here, not based on deep economic science, but I think my premises are solid. Because of higher taxes we have in BC and because of the constraints, not enough pipeline, we pay about $2 billion a year more for gasoline at the pump than we would if we had Ontario conditions. And this is not just recent ones where it's suddenly very cheap in Ontario, but going back over the last year or two, you would see that phenomenon of $2 billion a year extra. So that's how consumers are paying the price of politics, really.
One thing I also wonder, too, why aren't we encouraging people to use natural gas to power their cars? It's pretty clean, pretty efficient, and right now pretty cheap.
Right now it is, and will be in the future, too, because we have such abundant supplies of natural gas, especially in northeast BC. There's lots in Alberta as well. And I think that technology does exist. It's proven. It's not kind of cutting edge like electric cars have always been that. As wonderful as it is to ride in an electric car, I did that in a friend's Tesla a few days ago. It's fantastic. The torque in those things, it's beautiful. Comfortable ride, beautiful design inside. It's great. Maybe cold weather could be a challenge, but the reliability you get from natural gas is known, because you spark that natural gas 100% of the time. It will be there to ignite, and you can power an engine with that. You do that with these designed in Vancouver, Westport technology on Cummins engines. They're using it in China. We can definitely do it. If you look at what FortisBC is doing, they have fleets that they supply. There's a site, Mount Hayes on Vancouver Island, where they do that. But the uptake has not been what it needs to be. A few years ago, I think it was Ross Perot who talked about a grid across the U.S. having distribution of natural gas for the heavy transport trucks. And that's something we could do in Canada, too. So technology is there. The reliable fuel is there. The price is there. Why hasn't it happened? I think it's government that needs to look at their Clean BC plan. That's part of a big rollout of environmental improvement and performance, which is a desirable direction to go in. And more aggressively include that in their plans. It may not be right for every, personal automobile you have. Perhaps over time that will happen, but definitely right now, larger scale vessels in shipping fleets like ferries. I think the first cross-oceanic freighter to use natural gas was just launched this week. There was an announcement on that. So things are happening there. Buses, trucks, ferries. It's the way of the future. But more uptake is needed in BC because that could be a big part of our climate plan.
Why do you think governments treat cars as evil?
Well, they shouldn't really. If you think about the amount of taxes generated by a single car, a driver paying all those fees, and the gasoline taxes generated, that's pretty good revenue. Also, it allows people to get to where they need to go without very costly infrastructure being built. There are places where they're trying to use Ubers or even taxis instead of putting in bus services. And guess what? It's more efficient and cheaper for a municipality to do that in certain cases. I don't think you'd want to do that in downtown Montreal or New York City or Vancouver, but it can be a very efficient way to direct a specific resource at a need exactly when it's needed, and relatively cheaply too. I think the cost of taking a Canada Line ride over a few decades, I remember calculating that years back when they were building the line, it was, I forget the exact number, but it was much more than your fare. I mean, the cost of putting that in is expensive. I'm not arguing against rapid transit. I think we need more of it. However, when it comes to personal automobiles, it's a symbol of freedom. It's what allows people to get to work. In Vancouver, you're fine if you don't have a car, but not so if you live in Fort St. John or Kamloops or any number of name a rural community. So I think the reality is that in a place like BC with low population density and large distances to travel and often challenging terrain, we have to accept that personal vehicles are going to be in the mix forever. The government is talking about a total conversion to an electric fleet. I think there's some public relations value in saying that, but honestly, I just cannot envision how that could possibly come about. I think what will happen is that conventional internal combustion vehicles will get hyper efficient. They already are doing that, and it will allow people to have the reliability and freedom of conventional fuels used incredibly efficiently, and that will be a good way to go. It would be a desirable thing. I think right now with the sort of climate almost hysteria developing, we are pushed into decision making that isn't necessarily indicative of how things will more likely unfold, given the realities of the laws of physics and politics and just how people like to do things.
Carbon taxes. BC's had one now for over a decade. Has it done anything about carbon footprint?
Well, no, it hasn't really made any difference. The argument that the economists who are super enthusiastic about carbon taxes in BC will make is, well, what you're missing here, if you're saying no change has been made, and they can't argue that less gasoline has been used, but per capita, because it isn't. It's the same or perhaps more. Different analyses have shown us contrasting results. But what they'll say is the energy intensivity of the BC economy has reduced. Now, that's the claim. I haven't seen it properly tested. I'm quite skeptical. I think where we have probably a significant amount of change that has maybe led to some reduced intensity in industry is more natural gas being used. I think that we also have seen between 2000 and now, we've seen a dramatic increase in the improvements in the natural gas production in BC, especially in the sense that there is a lot less emissions being produced by that. So I think that is a big part of the story, just simply to say because we have a carbon tax that is one of many taxes on gasoline, that's changed the world. Difficult to see that. I think we need some more study on it. And in the meantime, we're coming up towards April where the BC carbon tax, which has been around for 10 years, will be increased yet again. And then we have 2 more scheduled increases in the carbon tax to follow that. So we're coming into times of change on that, and it's going to cost consumers a lot more not really any proof that past performance has done anything to reduce how much gasoline we use.
Now, the Premier said, everybody can afford an extra penny or two for a liter of gasoline, but what about the transportation costs for every good that you consume? Food, appliances, utilities, and so on.
Well, yes, that all does add up, and it compounds through the chain of manufacturing and distribution. I don't think that's very fairly reflected in our carbon tax rebate system. I mean, the feds are saying that, our carbon tax is going to result in you getting more money back than you paid in taxes. Well, does anyone believe that? It just is too incredible to be true.
Yeah, and would it apply to BC?
Well, that's the crazy thing, Jim, because we've been the early adopters. We were told for years by the green movement that we needed to be the ones who showed the world what an example could be. Well, I'm not sure everyone believed that, but okay, we were the climate leaders for 10 years. Well, what's our reward? After 10 years, we're going to have the same tax structure, no rebate, and Canada, the parts of it that are pushed into it or are leading their way into it, as the case may be per jurisdiction, they are going to get the rebate, and no one has talked about this happening for BC. I think people are going to be mighty sore about that once they start to realize what the reward of climate leadership really is. It's squat. I think let's all agree we do have to do the right thing in acknowledging that there are urgent problems with the climate. This isn't the show where, I think anyone would see it any differently. But the way we get there is really what's in dispute right now. I think there's a great big argument that hasn't really been fully formed or thrashed out. But I'm on the side of greater efficiency, always improving, moving forward. We can't stop, can't go back. We have a population of the world going towards 10 billion, not far from that. And that's the reality of the planet. We look at the USA, they are pumping out the gas and oil, that like never before. They're becoming a world superpower in energy. China's appetite for fossil fuels is going up, contrary to the hype you hear out there. It's just not the case that they're using less energy from conventional forms. So these are realities. And here we are in little BC. We're so sheltered, I think, from the world at times. There are people trying to stop a natural gas pipeline that, for heaven's sake, is going to help China remove 19 million cars from the road, in effect, when used for replacing coal. And you'd think that would be a good thing, but we have the climate zealotry that is chasing after it as if it's the end of the world, that BC is doing the right thing by getting LNG to the markets where it's needed. That's how upside down things are right now, Jim.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
I'm Douglas Mason, CEO of Naturally Splendid, symbol NSP on the TSX Venture Exchange. Naturally Splendid is a biotechnology and consumer products company focused on the global cannabis and health markets. Naturally Splendid is expanding distribution in this rapidly growing market with products currently in Canada, the USA, South Korea, Germany, and Australia. To view our comprehensive company presentation and for more information, please visit our website at naturallysplendid.com.
I'm Kelly Jennings, CEO of PowerBand Solutions. PowerBand is a cloud-based provider of auction, inventory, and finance solutions that make buying, selling, and financing vehicles more efficient. PowerBand Solutions trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol PBX and on the OTCQB symbol PWWPF and on Frankfurt symbol 1ZB. For more information, please visit us at powerbandsolutions.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, what about the economic benefits of having liquefied natural gas being produced here in BC?
Well, it's probably the biggest vitamin shot that you could imagine the economy getting. I mean, everyone's heard the biggest project, private sector project in Canadian history, and I think that's becoming embedded in the culture. We all know that. But what does it really mean when you drill down? And I think the value chain, let's break it down, okay? So in order to have LNG, liquefied natural gas, as an export, and that's natural gas that's cooled down, really, really cold, so it can be put into a ship and then sent to market, and we're in a really good place to do that. What do you need to do? So the first thing you need to do is get the gas. We have the gas, especially in the Montney Formation, which is a shale formation up in the northeast of BC. It actually, a big chunk of it is in Alberta, and they've got lots of drilling there. Montney is quite a special formation because it has not only gas, but that gas has a lot of liquid content. So you can do pentanes and condensates that are used in the oil sands, all these different products, some of which are in manufacturing to make chemicals and plastics. So it's that stuff with more liquid to it that is probably what you've got in your barbecue as propane, stuff like that. Natural gas that they need to make LNG with is a bit of a different story. They need to take all that stuff out because they just want the pure gas molecules to work with. And once they've discovered it, drilled it, pulled it out of the ground, they process it up in the northeast. They have processing plants that are located strategically. The gas is taken off by pipelines. Now you think, oh, well, how much activity is required? I looked at, I think it was last year's, or 2017's figures for investment like that. These gas plants and local pipelines in the northeast. I figured it was about $5 billion worth of investment just in 1 year. That is actually what the stats proved to be for that year when we look back on it. And you think, what if $5 billion of infrastructure was invested into Vancouver? What if it was a new SkyTrain line and, let's say, a Vegas-style hotel with 3,000 beds? That would be $5 billion you could spend to develop infrastructure, economic infrastructure in the Vancouver area. Would that be headline news? Of course it would be. It would be on the front page every day. When it happens in northeast BC, no one ever hears about it outside of a few, and it's never in the news. And I think that's really unfortunate because most of us then don't realize, how big and how important it is. So anyways, you get that natural gas, creates a big impact through those things. That's a lot of jobs, $5 billion in all kinds of different areas. You wouldn't believe how many subspecialties there are in this. I've been looking into that too. But the pipeline then has to be built. That's another, what's the number, $6 or $7 billion. That's laying pipe from one side of the province to the other. And then finally, you've got the actual liquefaction plant on the coast, the LNG plant, which is basically a gigantic fridge built in Korea, probably built or somewhere in Asia, I believe, and brought over in segments. A very specialized thing, very costly, and they bring those components in. So right now, I think there was some news today. LNG Canada was talking about 1,000 apprentices now trained in the trades. This amounts to jobs in electrical and pipe fitting, things like that, where you're building these components and putting them together and making sure they work. Huge number of jobs in that. And so you put it all together. They talk about the 10,000 jobs, and once you break it down, it's actually pretty easy to see where those jobs are. And oh, by the way, there's a lot of jobs in finance, real estate, insurance, government administration. It's all regulated. So regulators up the yin-yang, people watching the processes, issuing the permits. And then that's not even talking about the camps. I went past the camp in Kitimat last summer. I was up there, and they have thousands of people they are creating residences for so that they can, when they come to work, have a place to sleep. And this is, what in sum, that's the LNG economy. It's a gigantic part of our economy.
Are First Nations people being included in all those jobs?
Oh yeah, I mean the way that the First Nations all the way along the line from different parts of the country are engaged in this, it's really the key to realizing the benefits of this kind of investment for the communities they're in. Now, in the past, I think everyone's aware that Canada is not the success story in First Nations deployment that it could have been or should have been. But in the future, we have the ability to change that. And that's what's happening. I have been meeting with First Nations who are building the capacity. Times are different. First Nations are taking the lead. They're saying, look, if the rest of you Canadians can't get your act together to build these things we need, we're going to do it. We're going to take equity positions in these projects. We're going to get it done. Groups like the Indigenous Energy Alliance, the First Nations Major Projects Coalition, I'm going to meet with them in a couple of weeks in Prince George, where they are looking at the next step in evolving their fiscal and operational capacity to be heavily involved in major projects, because that's the future of BC. It's an exciting time to be in that space.
Right now, we're not hearing as many protests now about LNG. Is it because it's cold and the fact that people are huddled around their natural gas furnaces?
Well, I think it's a reminder that it's not an abstraction that people could just, dismiss or should lightly protest. It's something that is needed for daily life, even survival. We've built our habitations in places where there is cold weather, and we need to survive that. And natural gas does that better than anything else. And so I think what we're seeing is probably less activity there also because the vast majority of Canadians realize that this is just a project, the pipeline to connect the gas fields to the coast, that's absolutely necessary for Canada. And I think this is a slow realization. We're going to see more activity on this in the coming weeks. I think as people realize the number of jobs available, there's going to be a lot more excitement about getting into education and that kind of thing. And I think the very small minority voices that are saying we shouldn't do this have so far not made the argument that they should be the ones to be the tail wagging the dog.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Grand Portage Resources recently completed the 2018 drill program on its 100% controlled Herbert Gold Discovery property located in the prolific Juneau Belt in southeast Alaska. Drill results are expected through late 2018. Past drill results included numerous multi-ounce gold assays on multiple veins. Grand Portage trading symbols are GPG on the TSX Venture, GPTRF on the OTC QB, and GPB on Frankfurt. For more information, please visit our website, grandportage.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Hi, Jim. Sorry about that. You got my complete attention there. I just had a momentary distraction I had to deal with.
I'll just start us over here.
Okay.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, in his State of the Union address, President Trump said he wanted the U.S. to be the world's superpower for supplying energy and be the number one source. What does that do to Canada?
Well, that's one of the more credible statements I've heard from President Trump in quite some time, because what he's saying is actually what's happening. It's due in large part to the shale oil resources they've got, but also what's happening in Texas, where they've seen some of these oil fields become globally significant in a very short time, and it's created an incredible amount, thanks to technology, of oil and gas available. They're competing with us not just in crude oil, but also in natural gas and LNG. They're getting to market faster than Canada is with LNG, which is amazing when you think back to, a few years ago, 5-6 years ago, when a lot of people in BC were sort of mocking and scoffing the idea of getting Canadian LNG to market. The U.S. was actually working quietly and diligently to do it. So I think, once again, the price of maybe being too polite, and we have to entertain every single naysayer and give them full hearing, is costing us, because getting to market means that the U.S. will also get the benefits of having energy security. They're not going to have to rely on any other countries to supply them with fuel, which is always important. It's a cold, hard world out there. As nice as it is to live in lovely Canada, the rest of the world, it's a place of intense competition. And right now, Canada is losing out on that. That's what it means for us. I think it's clear that our inability to get through decision-making processes and assure investors that they can deal with competent deciders here in Canada, it's costing us not having that in place. It's costing us dearly. We're losing the interest of investors, number one. We're also losing existing companies and rolling stock that is moving to places like Texas to earn proper returns for the investors in it. And, this adds up as a new energy exporting superpower, the United States will have enormous leverage to have its way and dictate its terms with its neighbors. I think we're the neighbor that is going to become the one that is just simply, a term that comes to mind, a plaything, really a small appendage of the U.S. We are setting ourselves up for that, even though our destiny truly is to be something much greater than that.
Are we suffering from either incompetent leaders or ignorant leaders?
Well, I think there's always a combination in any leadership mix of those things, and hopefully leaders or voters sort that out. I think there is a deeper thing that concerns me. It's almost a culture of indecision. You know, years back, Jim, I was in the Philippines during a coup attempt, and the Senate was in an uproar, and I remember reading in the newspaper a bitter criticism from the opposition in the Philippines Senate of the government handling of the crisis, saying, you have taken a Canadian-style approach to this. And as best I could figure out is, you know, you guys just didn't really act decisively to solve this. And, you know, I think that reputation that Canada has got internationally is sadly too well earned. What we need to have is leaders who, okay, we can deal with the stumbles and the pitfalls of government. That happens. We're only human. But we need to have leaders with true spine who say, we do see the North Star of what's needed. We're going to move towards that goal. We will deal with those who have to be part of the conversation. We will respect those who have legitimate claims. We will ensure that First Nations are always, in terms of the land and their rights, respected and heard. We have a Supreme Court that has laid things down. We have decisions that bind us, and that's all fine. It doesn't mean we can't move forward, but there is the sense that, oh well, we just can't do anything, so let's not even try. And that's really what's killing us now. It's just a combination with, I think, the philosophy that on our fuel supply, the only thing we can do is not use fuel anymore. That's not how the world is unfolding in the U.S. It's not how it's unfolding in China. They are the countries that are most dominant. We are a small part of it. And to say that we are going to instantly build 110 Site C-sized large hydro dams across Canada to replace fossil fuels, well, that's not how it's going to play out. You know, the David Suzuki Foundation is the one advocating for rapid decarbonization that will require 110 dams, but they're also the organization that is opposing any attempt to put a shovel in the ground to build Site C. How could it possibly be that these fantasies about this energy future could ever be fulfilled in these circumstances? It's not going to happen. So we need realists with determination who care for Canada to be running the country. And I don't see enough of that, I'm afraid.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks, Jim.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. You can find him on Twitter at SJMuir. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.